Most people think they know you after one conversation. They see the polite smile, the thoughtful nods, the way you remember their dog's name from 3 months ago. They think that's all there is. They're seeing maybe 10% of who you actually are. The truth is, as an INFJ, you're operating on 10 distinct psychological layers simultaneously, and most people never get past the first one. What they don't realize is that each layer isn't just complexity for complexity's sake. Each one is a strategic advantage that makes you psychologically superior in ways they can't even comprehend. Today, we're diving deep into all 10 layers, and by the end, you'll understand why your so-called overthinking is actually your greatest superpower. But before you can master that superpower, you have to understand the first layer, the one that keeps you safe, but also keeps you hidden. Most people miss this next detail, but it changes everything about how you see your own social anxiety. Before we start, please hit the like button, comment, and subscribe so you won't miss any of our weekly deep dives into the world of personality types. And if you're looking for a deeper understanding of yourself and your INFJ personality, browse our favorite INFJ products in the description, and click the link in the comments to take our favorite free personality test. Layers 1 to 2, the surface deceptions. Layer 1 is what I call the social facade, and it's the version of you that everyone thinks they know. This is the INFJ, who makes appropriate small talk in elevators, remembers to ask about your weekend plans, and nods politely during meetings that could have been emails. People see this layer and think you're just naturally pleasant, maybe a little quiet, but fundamentally normal. Here's what they're missing. This isn't the real you being nice. This is you running a sophisticated energy management system. Every interaction at this level is calculated to preserve your psychological resources for what actually matters. You're not being fake when you smile at your coworker's boring story about their commute. You're being strategic. You know that creating friction at the surface level drains energy you need for deeper work. This social facade serves as a protective shield that keeps people at a safe distance while maintaining the relationships you need to function in society. It's like wearing noise-canceling headphones in a crowded room. You can still hear what you need to hear, but you're filtering out the chaos that would otherwise overwhelm your system. Most people mistake this politeness for simplicity. They think what you see is what you get. They have no idea you're simultaneously processing 17 different data streams while asking them how their presentation went. This layer isn't deception. It's sophisticated social engineering that allows you to exist in a world that wasn't designed for people who feel everything at maximum volume. Layer 2 runs much deeper, and this is where things get interesting. I call this the empathic mirror, and it's the part of you that unconsciously absorbs emotional data from everyone within a 50-foot radius. While you're having that surface-level conversation, you're also picking up on your colleagues' anxiety about their performance review, your friend's disappointment about their relationship, and the general tension in the room that nobody else seems to notice. This isn't some mystical ability. It's your nervous system operating like a high-level social radar system, constantly scanning for emotional frequencies and threat assessments. You're reading micro-expressions, tonal shifts, body language changes, and energy patterns that most people's brains simply ignore. Your empathic mirror is collecting data that helps you navigate social situations with unprecedented accuracy. The exhaustion that INFJs talk about after social interactions isn't because you're antisocial. It's because you've been processing multiple emotional frequencies simultaneously while maintaining your social facade. Imagine trying to have a conversation while 5 different radio stations are playing in your head at full volume. That's what every group interaction feels like for you. This is why you seem off or distracted in group settings. You're not being rude or disinterested. You're managing an overwhelming amount of emotional input while trying to maintain normal social functioning. Other people walk into a room and see faces. You walk into a room and immediately feel the collective emotional temperature, the unspoken tensions, the hidden disappointments, and the genuine connections. What makes this a strategic advantage is that you're operating with information that others don't have access to. You can sense when someone needs support before they ask for it. You can detect when a group dynamic is about to shift. You can feel when someone is lying, not because you're paranoid, but because their emotional frequency doesn't match their words. But these surface layers are just the beginning of something much more complex. Most people think they understand INFJs after experiencing layers 1 and 2, but they're not even close to seeing the real psychological architecture that makes you who you are. Now, absorbing all that emotional data is heavy, but it's actually fuel for a much more powerful system. This next part is where things get interesting, because it's where your brain stops feeling and starts calculating. Layers 3 to 4, the pattern recognition system. Layer 3 is where your brain becomes a supercomputer that most people don't even realize exists. I call this the pattern seeker, and it's the part of you that connects a conversation you had in 2019 with something your coworker mentioned yesterday and a news article you read last week. While other people see isolated events, you see interconnected webs of meaning that span years of accumulated data. This isn't random association or overthinking. This is your mind operating like a sophisticated pattern recognition system that's constantly running background processes. You're not just remembering what happened, you're cataloging how it connects to everything else that's ever happened, creating a vast network of relationships between ideas, experiences, and observations that most people's brains simply don't track. Here's what makes this a strategic advantage. When someone asks you for advice, you're not just drawing from your immediate experience. You're accessing a database of patterns you've observed across hundreds of similar situations. You can predict outcomes because you've seen this exact sequence of events play out before, just with different people and slightly different circumstances. Other people call this intuition, but it's actually sophisticated data analysis happening at a subconscious level. Your brain is constantly asking questions like, where have I seen this before? What were the variables that led to success or failure? What patterns am I detecting that others are missing? This is why your gut feelings are usually right. They're not mystical hunches. They're conclusions based on pattern recognition that's happening too fast for your conscious mind to track. This pattern-seeking ability extends beyond just social situations. You see connections between seemingly unrelated fields of knowledge. You understand how a concept from psychology applies to business strategy. You recognize how historical patterns repeat in modern politics. You connect dots that exist in completely different domains because your brain refuses to compartmentalize information the way most people do. The challenge is that you often can't explain how you know things. Someone asks why you're sure their new relationship won't work out, and you struggle to articulate it because you're processing dozens of subtle indicators that you've seen lead to the same outcome before. You just know, but you can't always prove it until time validates your assessment. Layer 4 builds on this pattern recognition and creates what I call the moral architect. This is the part of you that has constructed a rigid internal code of ethics that you will never, ever compromise. While other people's values shift based on convenience or social pressure, yours are carved in stone. This isn't stubbornness. This is psychological integrity, operating at a level that most people find incomprehensible. Your moral architecture isn't based on what you've been told is right or wrong. It's based on deep philosophical principles that you've developed through years of observing human behavior and its consequences. You've seen what happens when people compromise their values for short-term gains. You've watched relationships crumble when trust is broken. You've observed how small ethical compromises lead to larger moral failures over time. This unwavering integrity becomes magnetic in a world full of performative authenticity. People are drawn to you because they sense that you're the same person in private as you are in public. They know that when you give your word, it means something. When you make a commitment, you'll honor it, even when it becomes inconvenient. The strategic advantage of being predictably ethical is that people learn they can trust you with their deepest secrets, their most vulnerable moments, and their most important decisions. You become the person others turn to when they need genuine advice, rather than just validation. Your reputation for integrity opens doors that manipulation and politics never could. When these two layers work together, the pattern recognition and moral architecture, they create what people often mistake for psychic abilities. You can predict not just what will happen, but what should happen based on ethical principles. You see the patterns that lead to genuine fulfillment versus the ones that lead to temporary satisfaction followed by regret. This is where most people think they understand INFJs, but the real complexity starts now. These foundational layers of pattern recognition and moral integrity feed into something much deeper and more sophisticated. Having a rigid moral code is your compass, but it's not where you actually live. There's a secret world beneath this one that most people would find shocking if they ever saw it. Layers 5 to 6, the creative underground. Layer 5 is where most people would be shocked to discover what's actually happening inside your mind. I call this the creative recluse, and it's the world of unfinished novels sitting in your Google Drive, the secret playlists that tell stories you've never spoken out loud, and the elaborate what-if scenarios that play out in your head during boring meetings. While everyone else sees you as practical and grounded, you're actually running a 24/7 problem-solving laboratory in your mind. That half-finished screenplay isn't procrastination. It's you working through complex human dynamics and exploring different ways relationships could unfold. Those random story ideas that pop into your head aren't distractions. They're your brain creating safe spaces to test theories about human nature without real-world consequences. This creative layer serves as your psychological workshop, where you disassemble and reassemble ideas, relationships, and possibilities. You're not just daydreaming when you zone out during conversations. You're actively running simulations, exploring alternative outcomes, and developing solutions to problems that don't even exist yet. Your creativity isn't separate from your analytical abilities. It's how your analytical abilities express themselves. The strategic advantage here is that you're constantly prepared for scenarios that catch other people completely off guard. When a crisis hits, you've already mentally rehearsed 17 different ways it could play out. When someone needs a creative solution to a complex problem, you've been unconsciously working on similar challenges for months through your various creative projects. Your unfinished projects aren't evidence of lack of follow-through. They're evidence of a mind that's more interested in the process of discovery than the product itself. Each abandoned novel taught you something about character development. Each half-completed song helped you understand emotional expression. Each discarded business idea added to your understanding of human motivation and market dynamics. This is why INFJs often struggle with traditional creative advice about finishing what you start. You're not creating for external validation or commercial success. You're creating to understand, to process, to explore possibilities that can't be explored any other way. Your creative output is actually research and development for your understanding of the human experience. Layer 6 builds on this creative foundation and creates what I call the existential wanderer. This is the part of you that demands meaning in every interaction, purpose in every activity, and significance in every choice. While other people can enjoy surface-level entertainment and casual relationships, you're constantly asking the deeper questions that make others uncomfortable. You're sitting at brunch, listening to your friends discuss their weekend plans, and your brain is simultaneously wondering about the nature of fulfillment, whether their choices align with their deeper values, and what it means to live authentically in a world that rewards conformity. You can't turn off this existential analysis any more than you can turn off your heartbeat. This isn't pretentious intellectualism. This is a fundamental need for substance that operates at a psychological level. You literally cannot find satisfaction in activities that don't connect to something larger than themselves. This is why you're immune to viral trends, superficial social media culture, and the endless cycle of consumption that drives most people's behavior. The strategic advantage of being a depth seeker in a shallow world is that you're naturally positioned to identify opportunities that others miss. While everyone else is chasing the latest trend, you're focused on timeless principles and enduring values. You see through marketing manipulation because you're always asking what's really being sold and why people really want it. Your existential wandering also makes you incredibly valuable to others who are going through transitions or questioning their life choices. You've already thought deeply about the questions they're just starting to ask. You've explored the philosophical frameworks they need to navigate their uncertainty. Your creative underground has been preparing you to guide others through the exact existential challenges they're facing. These creative depths fuel innovation and authentic leadership because you're not interested in copying what already exists. You're interested in understanding why things exist and whether they should continue to exist in their current form. This combination of creative exploration and existential questioning creates a unique form of wisdom that most people spend their entire lives trying to develop. But the loneliness of seeing patterns others miss, of needing depth in a world that celebrates surface, feeds into something even more powerful and more protective. Now, everything I've told you about your depth and your vision won't work if you don't know this next step. This step is what literally prevents you from being destroyed by the very people you're trying to understand. Layers 7 to 8, the strategic defense system. Layer 7 is where people start to think you've become cold, distant, or suddenly different, but they're witnessing something far more sophisticated than a mood change. I call this the strategic ghost, and it's your ability to emotionally detach from people and situations months before you actually remove yourself physically. What looks like sudden coldness is actually the end result of a careful emotional audit that's been running in the background for a long time. Here's how it actually works. Someone crosses a boundary or violates your trust. And while you continue showing up, being supportive, and maintaining normal interactions, you're simultaneously running a detailed assessment of whether this relationship serves your psychological well-being. You're not being dramatic or oversensitive. You're conducting the kind of thorough analysis that most people never bother to do until after they've been seriously damaged. During this ghost phase, you're testing whether patterns change, whether apologies lead to actual behavioral shifts, whether the person is capable of growth, or if they're fundamentally incompatible with your values. You're giving them every opportunity to prove that the relationship is worth maintaining, while simultaneously preparing yourself emotionally for the possibility that it isn't. This strategic detachment isn't cruelty. It's sophisticated emotional intelligence that recognizes the difference between temporary conflicts and fundamental incompatibilities. You've learned that staying emotionally invested in relationships that violate your core values leads to resentment, exhaustion, and ultimately, more painful separations later. By ghosting emotionally first, you're protecting both yourself and the other person from a messier, more destructive ending. The strategic advantage here is that when you finally do implement the door slam, you've already processed the grief, worked through the anger, and accepted the reality of the situation. While the other person is just beginning to understand that something has changed, you've already completed the emotional work of ending the relationship. You can walk away cleanly because you've already done the psychological heavy lifting. People often mistake this for being unforgiving or holding grudges, but it's actually the opposite. You're so committed to maintaining your psychological health that you're willing to make difficult decisions before resentment has a chance to build. You'd rather end things while you can still wish someone well than wait until the relationship becomes toxic for both parties. Layer 8 operates even deeper and reveals something that makes people genuinely uncomfortable when they recognize it. I call this the shadow analyst, and it's your ability to see manipulation, self-deception, and destructive patterns in others with uncomfortable accuracy. You don't just notice when people are lying to you, you notice when they're lying to themselves, and you can predict how those lies will eventually destroy their relationships, their careers, or their peace of mind. This isn't judgment or superiority. It's pattern recognition applied to human psychology at a level that most people find disturbing. You can watch someone make choices that seem positive on the surface while simultaneously seeing the underlying motivations that will sabotage their success. You recognize when someone is heading toward their own villain arc months before they realize they've started compromising their values. The burden of this shadow analysis is that you often see people's potential for both extraordinary good and devastating harm. You watch someone you care about making decisions that you know will hurt them and others. But you also know that warning them will either fall on deaf ears or make you the target of their defensiveness. You become like Cassandra from Greek mythology, cursed to see the future, but never be believed until it's too late. This creates a profound loneliness because you're constantly bracing for impacts that others don't see coming. You're watching relationships deteriorate in real time while everyone else thinks things are fine. You're seeing career disasters approaching while others are celebrating short-term wins. You're recognizing toxic patterns while others are still in the honeymoon phase of new connections. But this shadow analysis also provides incredible protection. You can spot manipulators before they gain significant access to your life. You can identify toxic work environments before they damage your mental health. You can recognize when someone's personal growth has stagnated and they're about to start dragging others down with them. The combination of strategic ghosting and shadow analysis creates a defense system that operates like psychological body armor. You're protected not because you're paranoid, but because you're paying attention to information that most people ignore until it's too late. But beneath even these protective layers lies the true source of INFJ power, something that transforms all this complexity from a burden into a competitive advantage. Seeing the shadow in others is a burden, but there's a final failsafe in your identity that allows you to walk away from it all and start over. Most people are terrified of this next layer, but for you, it's your ultimate escape hatch. Layers 9 to 10, the core transformation engine. Layer 9 is where INFJs reveal something that genuinely terrifies people who need predictability and stability. I call this the Phoenix Core, and it's your readiness to burn down your current life and rise from the ashes as someone completely different when authenticity demands it. While other people make incremental changes and gradual adjustments, you're capable of radical reinvention that leaves everyone around you wondering, what happened to the person they thought they knew? This isn't instability or impulsiveness. This is psychological necessity operating at the deepest level. When you realize that your current life structure is preventing you from being authentic, you don't just make small tweaks around the edges. You're willing to demolish everything and rebuild from scratch, because living inauthentically feels like dying slowly from the inside out. Your Phoenix Core explains why INFJs can suddenly quit stable careers to pursue completely different paths, end long-term relationships that look perfect from the outside, or move across the country without warning. You're not running away from responsibility. You're running toward authenticity, with the kind of courage that most people never develop because they're too attached to external validation and security. This transformation ability is a strategic advantage because it means you're never truly stuck. When other people feel trapped by their circumstances, their relationships, or their career choices, you know that you always have the option to reinvent yourself completely. This psychological flexibility allows you to take risks that others can't take because they're afraid of losing their current identity. The Phoenix pattern also means you're constantly evolving and growing in ways that keep you intellectually and emotionally stimulated. You never become stagnant or predictable because you're always willing to question whether your current version of yourself is still serving your highest good. This commitment to perpetual becoming makes you psychologically anti-fragile. We've covered 9 layers of complexity, but none of them are the source of your power. This final layer is the one thing that integrates everything else, and if you haven't accessed it yet, you're only playing with half of your potential. Layer 10 is the deepest and most powerful layer, and this is where everything else originates. I call this the silent observer, and it's the true self that watches all the other 9 layers without judgment, attachment, or identification. This is the part of you that remains calm and centered, even when the other layers are experiencing chaos, conflict, or transformation. Your silent observer is the seat of pure intuition that just knows things without needing proof, explanation, or logical reasoning. This is where your most accurate insights come from, where your deepest wisdom originates, and where your unshakable sense of self resides, regardless of what's happening in your external circumstances. When you access this layer consciously, something remarkable happens. All the overwhelm from processing multiple emotional frequencies transforms into strategic information. All the exhaustion from maintaining social facades becomes efficient energy management. All the loneliness from seeing patterns others miss becomes confident independence. This silent observer is what allows you to integrate all 10 layers into a complete psychological operating system. You're not fragmented or contradictory. You're sophisticated and multidimensional, operating with capabilities that most people never develop because they never learn to access their deepest layer of awareness. Understanding these layers changes everything about how you navigate the world. because you realize that your complexity isn't a burden to manage. It's a competitive advantage to leverage. These 10 layers aren't psychological problems that need fixing. They're a sophisticated operating system that gives you capabilities most people spend their entire lives trying to develop. Your complexity is your competitive advantage, not your weakness. Subscribe for more insights that help you leverage your INFJ superpowers instead of apologizing for them. If you want to continue the journey to understanding yourself or an INFJ in your life, click either of the following videos, where we continue to unlock the secrets of the INFJ personality type.